And to be honest with you, I was almost doing it out of spite because I genuinely believed it didn't work because I was so special and unique. What I really envisioned, you sit on the back wall across from the door, and I swear to God, I would envision when this doesn't work and I go get drunk, I'm going to show up to a meeting drunk and I'm going to stand in the doorway. I'm going to tell everyone how full of crap they are. And I'm going to walk backwards out of that door, flipping everyone off.
Well, hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic, and we are glad you are all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery as a whole and newcomers to this podcast. Sober Speak is a podcast about recovery centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My job here on Sober Speak is simple. My job is to provide a platform to the amazing stories of recovery all around us. Consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. Please remember, we do not speak for AA or any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope with those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want and leave the rest at the curb for the trash man to pick up. Greetings from Studio AA, deep in the heart of Texas, on this here episode number 434 of Sober Speak. That was the voice of Mr. Chris M. that you heard at the beginning of this episode, and you are going to hear so much more from him in just a moment. But first things first, this here episode is made possible by Mr. David. And so you ask yourself, what exactly did David do? Well, David went by our humble little website, www.soberspeak.com. It clicked on the little yellow donation tab, and he made a contribution. So thank you so much, Mr. David. This here episode is coming straight out to you. So I am the lovely Mrs. M just swung by the office door here, Studio AA, and she said that she is cooking up some victuals tonight. Now, she doesn't always cook up victuals, but when she does, I get real excited. So let me just say this. I would say 80 to 90% of the time, I am veganish, right? But I'm not strict about it or anything, but I have a tendency to eat, for the most part, a plant-based diet, I think is what they call it. But the lovely Mrs. M is cooking up tonight. She's got some chicken with some onions on it, like a lot of onions, like a sauteed onions or whatever. And then she's got all these green beans that are flavored in all these different ways. I know nothing about cooking, by the way. And she also, and then there's some rolls and stuff like that. But here's the best part. She makes these, I don't really know how to just, they're like brownies, but the brownies, they're baked in a pan, and then they have all these like chocolate chips and then caramel stuff that is all layered in there, and they're baked just perfectly, and then she puts a little bit of ice cream on top. And so, as you could tell, I'm really looking forward to that. And it's getting, so when I'm recording this right now in Texas, it's about to get, it is very, very cold, and it's about to get even colder, much colder. And, you know, I am one of these people, I think it's my Scottish blood or something like that. I have a tendency to like the cool and the rain. I could actually survive well up in the upper north, in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, where it rains all the time. But I don't know. There's something about it I just like. One of my favorite things about the winter and being cold is going to bed at night. And it's really cold in the room, and you just kind of get into those blankets and stuff in there and just enjoy the cold weather. And I don't know. It's just cool to me. So, nonetheless, all right. So we are going to go on here. Oh, there is one other thing. I keep meaning to mention this. So I got a little bit of time here. I'm not going to do listener feedback today, so I'm going to put a little extra on the front end, probably to most people's dismay. But nonetheless, there is a guy in our group, and I'm not going to say his name because I didn't ask him if I could share this story. My guess is he wouldn't mind whatsoever if I share this story, but I find it just amazing. He reminds me of the gentleman in the Big Book who had a really good career. He didn't drink at all during that time. And then he retired and he put on his slippers or whatever to enjoy retirement. And then things just went downhill real quick. I forget the name of that guy. But nonetheless, this gentleman, he worked up until I think it was 65. And then between 65 and 70, he had some health issues. And he was ready to enjoy retirement. And because of all those health issues, he couldn't really enjoy retirement very much. So he kind of worked up some resentments, as he said, to the Lord about that. And because of that, then he started, and I may not have everything exactly straight here, but then he started drinking like a little bit at a time, just wine, from like 5 to 7 or 5 to 8 or something like that in the evening. And then it slowly started getting longer and longer and longer until he was a full-blown alcoholic. His wife left him and all kinds of stuff. It was just wild. And so then he got to be 76 years old. And he was so despondent that he went out in the backyard with a knife and he stabbed himself 3 times in the neck. And somehow, some way, the surgeon said, "You're really lucky that you didn't hit a major artery or a vein," and he survived that. And he got out of the hospital, went to treatment immediately, stayed there for, I think it was 90 days, and then came back and got in our group, the Frisco group, and he's been sober ever since for like 2.5 years or so. But that just blows my mind. And that just shows you how this thing can sneak up on us. None of us are immune from this. But it snuck up on him when he turned 70 years old. Like I said, he continued his journey to 76 drinking and then stabbed himself in the neck a few times. And then he got sober after that. It just blows my mind. And we absolutely love him in the group. But nonetheless, all right, I don't know why I wanted to share that, but I just felt it could be, how do you put it? It could be a warning for those out there. They say there's a couple of ways that you get in, like either the Big Book or the Bible or what. One of them is as an example, and the other way you get in is as a warning, right? So don't be the warning, be the example. All right, now on to Mr. Chris M. And by the way, I think I said this before. I can't even remember, but this is Chris M, not Chris S. And some of the other Chris's we have had in the past. It's a very popular name within the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is Chris M, part 1. He is from the Dallas, Texas area, and we are calling this one Rigorous Honesty. So, some of you may remember, you may not, but he was on the podcast on episode number 5 when we first began this podcast, and a lot has happened to him since that time, so I wanted to have him back on. Chris has been sober since August of 2014, and this is the first part with Chris. This is part 1. We're going to have a part 2 next week for your enjoyment. We discuss his military background, his bouts of being both homicidal and suicidal. We talk about a suggested formula called the 5 Alive that helps people get sober, and Chris subscribes to that. His skepticism regarding Alcoholics Anonymous, how steps 4 and 5 were the turning point for Chris, how the truth will set you free. That's why we're calling this one Rigorous Honesty, and much, much more. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I present to you Mr. Chris M. Part 1, Rigorous Honesty. Enjoy this, and we will have the second part of Chris's interview next week. Enjoy. Okay, everybody. So we are sitting here today again. And when I say again, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on that in just a moment. But we are sitting here again with Mr. Chris M., not Chris S. I know we've had Chris S. on many times in the past. In fact, I think we had another Chris. But anyway, this is Chris M. So Chris, who is sitting here in Studio AA with me, right across from me. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Give your sobriety date if you wish, Chris, and tell people where you live in this great land of ours, please.
Hey, my name is Chris. I am an alcoholic, and I've been sober since August 28th of 2014, and I live in a North Dallas suburb.
So Chris lives here. Yeah, he lives near me in North Dallas. And when I say we're coming back on again, what I meant by that was Chris was one of the first people that I ever had on the podcast. I remember that. You were on episode number 5, is that right?
That's correct.
And I think it's called something like the turning point of
Step 3 is the turning point.
Step 3 is
the turning point.
It was the turning point. And my remembrance of that, and you can tell me what you remember about it, but my remembrance of it is that, first of all, I was scrambling. I had no idea what I was doing. We're on episode number 5. You were gracious enough to come over to my house, the house that I used to live in. And this would have been in 2018, I believe, at the beginning of 2018. And I remember taking your episode and producing it. When I say producing it, doing all the edits that I have to do and doing all the sound level out and all that kind of stuff and getting it out. And I remember you saying to me, a lot of people do this like once a week as opposed to once a month or something like that. And I thought to myself at the time, I said, there's no way I could do this once a week. This took so much time, but I heeded your advice. You don't even know this.
I don't remember any of this. Yeah.
And I thought, well, maybe I can do this once a week. Eventually, after you do it over and over and over, you get much more efficient at it, just like sobriety, right?
Yeah.
You learn how to do it. And I was able to start doing this once a week. So that's and I remember my wife at the time listening to your episode and telling me that she absolutely loved it.
Wow.
Yeah. So so I remember and I remember kind of scheduling you to get you over. And I remember, oh gosh, even scheduling at that time was just cumbersome for me. So anyway, now we are here. 7 years later, something like that, 2025?
7.5 years later.
So what do you remember about coming over at that time? Anything in particular?
No, I don't remember anything about it. As anyone with, I look back at that, I think I was sober for 3.5 years. I was just flattered anyone wanted to hear my story. And I never listened to that episode once until last week, and I was like, I better listen to it because I'm a really big guy and I think I have a very high voice when I talk, and so I don't like hearing my voice. And so for the very first time, I listened to it last week. So I was like, I got to figure out what the heck I talked about. And I found it to be somewhat tolerable, which is surprising because no one hates an alcoholic more than an alcoholic. And I thought it was somewhat coherent as well, which I was surprised about. I didn't like how long it went in terms of like not talking about the program. I don't feel like I really got in the pieces of the program itself. So I was about 45 minutes in. I was like, "Man, I would have done that differently. I would have spoken more about working these, taking some steps, but that's about all I remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember that conversation that you brought up.
Yeah. I remember the room we were in. I remember, anyway, I just remember all of it. It was because it was on the beginning stages for me, and I was just trying to learn how to do this, and I was so grateful that you would come up. You think you have a high voice, huh?
I do. Yeah. So much so that I'm probably doctoring it up a little bit right now without, subconsciously.
Well, you don't seem like you have a high voice, and I've heard. And let's just tell people we go to meetings together
Frequently,
right? And I've heard you talk many times, and that's why I wanted to have you over at that time. And I remember I got a lot of feedback at the time regarding your episode and such, and people really related to it. And I actually been kind of trying to get you over here over the last several years or whatever, and for whatever reason, and I just I respect people. You weren't ready at the time, and I just said that's fine with me.
I think there's a million reasons. I thought if I had said yes, I thought it would be like a little self-serving. And it's like, well, we hadn't not a ton has changed. Maybe some stuff has changed depending on when you had asked me, or maybe you asked me at some point. And it's one of the troughs in the waves of sobriety that we experience at times. And I was like, yeah, I'm not sure I'm the best representation of the program right now. But mainly, I just thought it was very self-serving. It's like double dipping in a meeting. It's like,
I got
you. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
Get it off your chest, but at the same time,
that makes sense. Well, and I know a lot of stuff has happened in your life since we last talked, and we're going to get into all of that. But let's, for the folks who by chance didn't hear episode number 5, or if they heard episode number 5 a long time ago and they have not remembered everything about it, let's go ahead and kind of start a little bit, just a, kind of a briefer version of, what it was like, what happened, and what you're like now. So tell me a little bit about where you came from, what you want to tell me about your background. What comes up for you there?
Yeah, I would just say I was raised by a single mom in Rhode Island in New England, and she moved around all over the place, from Rhode Island to the south side of Atlanta, Georgia, and then up to Nashville, Tennessee. And I never really fit in anywhere. I didn't belong ever my entire life. And at some point, I ended up in a North Dallas suburb, and a gal was interested in me. I didn't think that was possible, and so she convinced me to. Well, she didn't convince me. I convinced myself. I said, "Hey, she's drinking alcohol. You should probably give it a shot too." And that was my first drink, and it was kind of off to the races there right away. I realized a couple of things. I was 17 or 18 years old, and from my very first drink, almost immediately that first night, everybody else was acting like 17 or 18-year-olds that were drinking. And I just wasn't getting drunk to the same degree that they were. And I think that when you're 17 or 18 years old and you're drinking, who can handle their liquor the best is the coolest. And so for the first time in my life, I was the coolest. I fit in. Once, for the first time ever, I belonged. And it was kind of off to the races there. And we experimented with some other substances and extracurricular activities. And that's how it all kind of began for me, for the drinking. And eventually I ended up joining the military. And going into the military, I would have told you that I was a professional drinker. I would rate myself a 10 out of 10 on the drinking capability scale. And almost immediately in the Army, I realized I was a 5 out of 10 at best. I mean, these guys were, I've heard that when D1 athletes go pro, the first practice they show up, they're like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe these guys are this fast and hitting this hard in the NFL. And that's what it felt like when it came to drinking when I joined the Army. I thought, wow. And I was off the rails going into that. And so my drinking took on great proportions in the military. And in that time, in 2006, 2006, we were in the surge going into Baghdad and Iraq, and we all genuinely believed that we were going to die. Like every one of us genuinely believed. We knew we were going overseas. It was not a question of if, but when. And every night we were seeing on the news just vehicles getting blown to smithereens. And we thought, well, this is going to be us for sure. And so we behaved that way. We behaved as men that were getting ready to die. I mean, the drinking, everything you could think of, the debauchery, the shenanigans were out of control. Something that you'd make a movie out of. And so somehow I made it back from Iraq. I spent a year in Iraq and I came back and I knew that something was wrong. And so I called a friend of mine that I had partied with prior to joining the military. And by this time, while I became a professional, he sobered up. And I said, hey, I don't know what to do, but I think I need to go to a meeting, one of these meetings that you go to. And so he took me to a meeting here in the North Dallas burbs, not one of the groups that I go to now. And these people said, meeting makers make it, and just put the plug in the jug. And at the end of the meeting, when someone asked if anyone had any other AA-related announcements, one of them said, yeah, don't drink. And, none of that stuff is anywhere in this program. That's not a thing. None of these things are things. And they all revolve around self-will. And being fresh out of the military and fresh back from war, I thought this was a program of self-discipline. And so I just stopped drinking. I didn't do anything else. And I didn't drink for 4 years. I was the guy that showed up on birthday night and got a 1-year chip to a group I'd never been to before, gave a very grand, probably 10-minute speech about all of my experience in sobriety, and never showed up until the 2-year chip time. So I had no sponsor, no book, no nothing. And I had gone to college on the GI Bill. I got a degree. I bought a house. I got a big corporate job. And 4 years into that, I was ready to die. I was suicidal. I was a dry drunk, and I wouldn't wish that. That was the worst time in my entire life, by far, even right now, was not drinking as an alcoholic and doing nothing else. So I was homicidal and suicidal. It was horrible. And luckily, I went out and I drank again. And about 3 months into that, everything came off the rails pretty quickly. And it was off to the races. They say, what do they say in the meetings? People have these sayings. It's not in the book, but it's like, they say when you go back out, it's worse than it was before, or it's immediately right where you pick up right where you left off.
Progressive.
I don't know if I picked up right where I left off, but in very short order, within about 2 or 3 weeks, it was exactly where I left off 4 years prior to that, when I called up that friend of mine. And through happenstance, my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, she convinced me to go to one AA meeting. And I went to that meeting in the Frisco group, and I looked at those steps on the wall, and I said to myself that is the only thing that I had not done. I had tried everything else, hot yoga. I'd lost all the weight. You know what I mean? Like you hear it all the time in the meetings.
Right.
How do you feel, buddy? Like, great, doing great. Lost 20 pounds. I'm going to run a half marathon for Thanksgiving. It's like, I mean, I'm happy for you, buddy, but what does that have to do with your sobriety? It's not what we're talking about here. And I was doing all of those things. And so I said to myself, I had never gotten a sponsor and I'd never worked these steps. So a guy came up to me at the end of the meeting and offered me his phone number, a guy named Ron. And I only took his phone number because he had an airplane embroidered on his shirt. And I thought and I knew he'd got out of a big Lexus, a big LS Lexus in the parking lot. I saw him walk in.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, this is Frisco. They've got money. He probably owns a plane. Maybe he can take me flying. I love aviation. And I took his number. And about 2 weeks later, he gave me those 5 things that I talked about on the first episode to do every day. And about 2 weeks later, I was 2 weeks sober. I was really miserable. And I called him up. I started feeling squirrely again, exactly where I felt 3 months prior to that when I went back out. And I called him up. I said, I don't know how this works, but I think I need to ask you, will you be my sponsor? And can we work some steps? And he laughed and he said, yes. And that changed everything for me. And I've been sober since August 28th of 2014. So just a little over 11 years now.
You mentioned the 5 things. Some people may not know what those 5 things are. The five things to do. Is that what do they call it? The five lives, something like that.
Yep.
Can you walk through those real quick?
Sure. I'll give the asterisks here that this is nowhere in the big book.
Right.
These are suggestions, but I think there's some validity to them, and they certainly helped me when I was newly sober. So it's when you wake up in the morning, ask God to keep you sober. Dear God, please keep me sober. Throughout the course of your day, do three things. Go to an AA meeting, talk to another alcoholic, and read some sort of AA literature. And in the advent of Zoom meetings, which I'm not a huge proponent of, I think human beings are social creatures. We need to look at other people in the eye on a regular basis. But in a pinch with Zoom meetings and the multiple AA apps that are free that you can download, there is zero excuse to not go to a meeting or read some sort of AA literature throughout the course of every day in 2025. And at the end of the day, he said, only if you stay sober, you can't do this if you drink. He said, at the end of that day, if you've stayed sober, I want you to get down on your knees again, physically get down on your knees, humble yourself before the creator of the universe, and just say, thank you for keeping me sober today. And I have done that for 11 years and some change. Since he told me that almost every day, I've gotten on my knees in a tent in the Bob Marshall Wilderness in Montana on a hike in the dark with my head brushing against the roof of the tent because it was a small hiking tent, and said, God, thank you for keeping me sober today. I've done that every day, including this morning.
I want to, you mentioned it on the beginning of this. And so I don't know where this is going to fit into your story really, but you talked about being a big guy, right? And I was thinking about that when you said, I was a great drinker even at 17 and 18. So you're a big guy. And did that help you to imbibe more alcohol?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think you're living proof of that. You're not a big guy, and I'm sure you can hold your own. And the Army taught me that too. I don't think size has anything to do with it. There were little guys that could drink just as much as me. I don't think it had anything to do with it. I also don't think that it's genetic. So I don't think that I have some sort of physical thing. I think when we hear people say that in meetings, and this is just my opinion, so if you don't like about it, go cry to your sponsor tonight, call them up, stop the episode now, hang up. But I've never heard, I think if there really was a medical cause of alcoholism, and I've heard it in the meetings, whatever it is, liquor metabolates in the sucralose at 41% higher versions in the left ventricle of the aorta in the heart of an alcoholic than it does in regular people. And it's like, I'm pretty sure if that were true, there'd be multiple pharmaceutical companies going after the cause of alcoholism. They always cite in New Hampshire, there's a study in 1985. I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think it's a spiritual malady that we have.
Okay. And I also want to, I want to go back just a little bit because there's a lot of people who listen to this who are in the military and such. And can you talk a little bit about your military experience and what you went through when you were over there and, what you did? You just talk about whatever you want to talk about there.
I don't really want to talk about. I think it was very unremarkable in a lot of respects. I was a scout, so reconnaissance was my deal. And in 2007 and 2008, there was not a lot of reconnaissance that needed to be done in Iraq. We knew where everything was, with satellite imagery. So, I went on a lot of patrols, what they call patrols, or where you just drive around waiting to get blown up or have someone take pot shots at you and go after them after that. But it was very unremarkable and unfulfilling. And the line from the book where it says the victor only appears to win in war is extremely, extremely accurate. And I have lost more friends here in the United States due to suicide, drugs, and alcohol than I ever did overseas to the hands of insurgents, for sure. And looking back on it, I think I probably had more in common with those insurgents than I do with, I'd be doing the same thing. If someone came here, I'd be doing the same thing. I'd be digging holes in the side of the road and planting bombs, But, it was shortly after 9/11. It's very easy. People say all the time, oh, you're going to go fight for the government or whoever, and they'll list off all these things. And it's First of all, you were in diapers in 2001, and the world was a very different place when those towers fell. Everyone had a very different opinion about everything, and I just wanted to go fight. That was it. And in all reality, before we get on the pity party about like being in the military and anything associated with that you hear all these days, I would say at least 51% of why I joined the military was to pick up chicks because I thought that the uniform would help me do that. I'm serious.
Yeah.
And free drinks in bars. I thought the uniform would help me do that. And it did help me do both of those things. But, selfish and self-centered. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that's the root of our troubles. And that's 51% of why I joined the military.
And when you said when you came back, you knew something was wrong and, but then you were kind of talking about your alcoholism. How did the service experience, did that dovetail anyhow, or were they basically two separate instances, if you will?
I would say when I came back, two things happened simultaneously. The first one is I was 11 months into a 12-month deployment and I was engaged to a woman and she broke up with me over the phone. And that destroyed me. It absolutely destroyed me. I would say three things happened. About that same time, 11 months into a 12-month deployment in an area south of Baghdad known as the Triangle of Death. So a very bad area, Mahmudiya, Ludafiya, and Yusufia. You can Wikipedia Triangle of Death and look it up. But I was just very disillusioned. It wasn't what I expected. It was not at all what I had expected. War was nothing like I expected. And I was very disillusioned with the military because all I joined to do was fight. And I don't really feel like I got to do that. And so those two things happened simultaneously. And also simultaneously, my contract was up. So it's like, as soon as I came back from Iraq, I now had no fiance. I was very disillusioned with everything, the world, war, the whole thing. And now I had no job. I was leaving the Army. So it's like, what do I do? It was a hot mess. And about that time, I had gotten into Kansas State University, which is right by Fort Riley, Kansas, which is where my fiance at the time had been going. Very small town, Manhattan, Kansas. And I said, well, I'm not staying in this small town with my ex-fiance. What am I going to see her in the bars with another guy? I'm not doing that. And so I left and I came home to Dallas. I lived with my mom. I moved in with my mommy and I went to Collin County Community College for a little bit. So yeah, that was, I don't think there's anything unique about, my service or many people's service. I think the alcoholic is terminally unique. We will literally kill ourselves trying to prove to other people how special we are. And if you experience the things I experienced and you did the things I did and saw the things I saw, you drink too. But you know what? None of you have. And I just think that's a horrible lie. I don't think there's anything special about me. Frankly, I don't think there's anything special about a lot of alcoholics. I think we're sick folks. And I don't think we should try to differentiate ourselves from one another. I'm sure I don't know. I'm just not the bro vet kind of guy. And I try to disassociate from that. I don't know why. I'm probably not being a good steward of the veteran community right now, but that's how I feel. I think I did the math, you can Google it, but well over 1 million people have been to Afghanistan or Iraq. I'm one of literally, I think over 2 million. I'm one of 2 million. There's nothing special about me. I was surrounded by giants. I was surrounded by men that were genuine heroes. And I'd like to tell one of their stories today, but I was not. And I would say my fiance leaving me was more traumatic than deploying. I got to do what I wanted to do. Going to Iraq was why I joined, and I went to Iraq. So I don't know. I'm sorry. That's a bad.
No,
that's a bad.
That's
take.
exactly no. I wanted to hear your thought process on that. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. It's not good or bad. It is you, and it is where you are now. And who knows? You could think different in 5 years, and you may have thought different 5 years ago. I mean, it's just how we are. We grow up. Go ahead.
If someone is listening to this and is a veteran and wants to talk about this, please send John an email, and John, you have my permission to give them my contact information. I'm happy to talk with any veteran about it. You may not really enjoy my opinion, but if you are a veteran and you're thinking about getting out of the military, or if you're a dude that's in the military or a gal and you want someone to talk to you, like I'm more than happy to talk to you because I've been in those shoes before. I've been in those shoes of suffering, those boots before, and I found a way out.
I get it. One other thing I wanted to ask you about that you talked about earlier, kind of switching gears here. You said that your fiance, I'm assuming not the same fiance, different fiance, convinced you to go to your first AA meeting, if I'm, or no, or go back to a meeting or something like that. Tell me about that conversation, how that went.
She had just told me that she had gone to a bunch of Al-Anon meetings, and at the time I had still been drinking.
Gotcha.
And I felt very guilty about it. So I said, I'm going to go to one AA meeting, that there was an evening. Look, go listen to episode 5 if you can put up with it, if you want to hear more of this voice. And I went through it in detail there. I probably spent too much time on it.
You want to hear more of your bro voice. Has anybody ever told you have a high? I mean, I have a higher voice than you.
It's one that I just, self-loathing. I don't know. I just don't like the sound of my own voice.
But it's not high.
I'm probably doctoring it a little bit.
No, but I've heard you talk in meetings many times. But
cut this part out.
All right, let's move on. Okay, so then you came to AA for your first meeting, and I know you had been out for some time. I think 4 years or something like that. Or actually, you'd been sober for 4 years, and then you went out for a period of time, and now you're back in. Take me from that point. What happened then?
I took some steps with my sponsor, Ron.
Yeah.
And he beat me through them because I took them very reluctantly as I went. And to be honest with you, I was almost doing it out of spite because I genuinely believed it didn't work because I was so special and unique. And I thought, okay, I have to do what I really envisioned. You sit on the back wall across from the door, and I swear to God, I would envision when this doesn't work and I go get drunk, I'm going to show up to a meeting drunk, and I'm going to stand in the doorway. I'm going to tell everyone how full of crap they are, and I'm going to walk backwards out of that door, flipping everyone off. I swear to God.
You are a scorched earth kind of guy. I really can see you do that.
And I said, but in order to do that, I knew that I had to do this whole thing. I had to take all of these steps. And I also couldn't lie to my sponsor. I had to do it. I had to actually do it. And I had never done this. So I said, I will get this sponsor. I will do whatever he tells me to do within reason. And I will not lie to him. And I knew if I did not do either one of those things, that I wouldn't have the ability to walk backwards out that door, flipping everyone off. I didn't have the right.
So when or how did things begin to, when did you realize you weren't going to stand at the back door and flip everybody off? Was there a time, or was it a process?
After my 5th step with my sponsor, after my 4th and 5th step with my sponsor. Yeah, I felt like one of you guys. That was when I first felt like one of you guys, and I wanted more. I told him everything that there was to tell another man. All the deep, dark secrets that I had, I told him. And at the end of that meeting, he said, it was an honor meeting with you today, same time next week. And I couldn't believe it because I lied to everyone about everything. And that's when I realized that this program was a little different, and I could look people in the eye for the first time.
Lied to everyone about everything. I mean, you don't have to go through every lie you've ever told, but what do you mean by that? I guess that was your perception of yourself. I'm lying to people. I have this facade. Talk to me a little bit about that. I guess dishonesty with others and yourself.
I would lie to everyone about everything. Anything that you could think of, I would just lie about. I was a pathological liar. For whatever reason, I don't want to play pop psychiatrist on this podcast about it, but I think subconsciously that I just thought if anyone ever knew the real me or the things that went through my head or the things that I've done, they would, they'd lock me up. They throw away the key.
Mm-hmm. And so for the first time, you sat down and you told the truth. Went through all 3 of the areas, I guess, resentment, fears, and sex/relationships, and talked to another man about that. And that was a kind of a turning point for you, it sounds like.
Yeah, go change the name of the first episode to step 5 was the 4 and 5 are the turning points. But I would say that if the whole point of this entire program and the cure to this disease is to develop conscious contact with a God of our own understanding, then I think the first way that we try to do that is we stop manipulating life. That's where I was really lying. I didn't trust God, so I would lie to everyone to try to manipulate life. And I remember my sponsor said, hey, why don't you try to go an entire day without lying to anyone? And that was a monumental task. I'd rather focus on the drinking. And I did. And I've done that ever since, frankly. I can probably count on one hand the number of lies I've told in the past 11 years to anyone about anything. And I think that is a form of trusting God. We just say, I'm going to tell the truth. There's another book that says the truth will set us free. I'm going to tell the truth and God's going to take care of the rest. And I'm going to count on the idea that as long as I'm telling the truth, I'm not going to end up in prison or under a bridge. And that has been my experience too. I had to stop lying. And as soon as I did that, that was the first time that I really let God, let me see if I can trust this God thing.
Okay. So, Chris, I have so many more questions I want to ask you. And I know we have a lot more to discuss. And if you are okay with it, I'm going to ask you to come back at another point and we can record another session and talk a little bit more about your journey in Alcoholics Anonymous as opposed to how you got here, so to speak. Would you be okay with that?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, Mr. Chris, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead, as I always do, read from, I don't know if I did this in episode 5. Did I do it in episode 5? Oh, wow.
You read 164 and you said the Lord's Prayer at the end, which I also forgot.
Oh, did we say the Lord's Prayer at the end? Oh, I didn't even know. Yeah.
Yikes.
That's okay. We can do it again if you want to keep up tradition.
Yeah, there are people that get offended by that.
Oh, yeah. All right. Believe me, I get emails all the time with people getting offended by something, or it's just like an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, right? I mean, somebody somewhere is going to get offended. We just do the best we can. Anyway, it says, page 164 says, abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us, like me and Chris M. Did I do that on the first one? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
As you trudge the road of happy destiny, may God bless you and keep you until then. Once again, Chris, thanks for coming in and joining me today.
Thank you.